She was still in her wedding dress when they found her, sitting on the cold marble tiles of a five-star hotel suite, her white satin gown soaked in blood, her mascara smudged, her veil torn, her mouth barely moving, until she whispered just one name. That whisper changed everything. What started as the happiest day of her life ended in a nightmare the police still struggle to explain. And the man she married, the man everyone thought was the perfect gentleman with a gentle smile and expensive taste? Well, he had secrets, big ones, the kind that make you wonder if you ever really know someone at all. Because minutes after Zara said "I do," someone fired a single shot, and nothing about her life, or his, would ever be the same again. But what if the groom wasn't the man she thought he was? At all? Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. This story will make you question trust, identity, and what really happened the night Zara said "I do." Zara Matthews was the kind of woman everyone in town knew by name. She taught second grade at Jefferson Elementary, always the first to arrive, the last to leave. She remembered every child's birthday and kept snacks in her desk drawer for kids who didn't have lunch. She wore long cardigans in the fall, baked cookies in the winter, and always smiled with her eyes. And Michael? Michael Carson was quiet, polite, handsome in a clean, buttoned-up kind of way. He wasn't from around here. He moved in 2 years ago, rented a modest house on the edge of town, worked remotely in finance. No criminal record, no gossip, no red flags, just private. To most people, it seemed like a beautiful match, a kind, beloved teacher and a grounded, respectful man with a good job and a quiet life. But then came the wedding night, and a single sound that shattered it all, a gunshot. So now we're left with questions no one saw coming. Why would a man with no history of violence suddenly shoot his new bride just hours after their vows? What was Zara hiding from him? Something she hadn't told anyone else. How did she survive that night in the hotel room? And what exactly did she whisper to the paramedics at the hospital? And what twist in this case made a small-town tragedy explode into national headlines? Because the truth is far more complicated than anyone imagined. And by the end of this video, you may find yourself asking, what would you have done if it were your daughter, your sister, or you? Let's begin. Zara was 34 years old, a second-grade teacher, the kind of woman who left little sticky notes in her students' backpacks just to say, "You did great today." She had this energy about her, soft but present. She wore bright scarves, mismatched earrings, and always carried a paperback novel in her purse. Her sister Julia said Zara felt things more deeply than most people. Joy, pain, fear, and she carried it all quietly. She'd moved to town just 2 years earlier, settling into a small rented cottage on Maple Lane. Neighbors liked her immediately. But there was something else about Zara, too, something beneath the surface. She never talked about where she'd lived before. She told people she needed a fresh start. When asked about her past, she'd smile and say, "Let's talk about you instead." Zara was warm, passionate, and fiercely private. Then came Michael Carson. He was 37, grew up just outside of town on his family's farm. Everyone knew the Carsons, honest, church-going people. Michael had been a bachelor most of his adult life, quiet, polite, never caused trouble. Some people said he was the kind of man you'd want your daughter to marry. He kept to himself, worked in accounting, and sat in the same pew every Sunday. Zara met him at a local community fundraiser. He helped her carry chairs after the event, and they talked for hours. It started slowly, coffee on Saturdays, church together on Sundays. They weren't the couple who posted everything online or flaunted their relationship. It was quiet, comfortable. From the outside, they looked content. 8 months later, they were engaged. Still, not everyone felt easy about it. One neighbor said Michael always had this stillness to him, like he was constantly holding something back. Another recalled that when Zara missed a book club meeting, Michael showed up at the host's door to ask where she was, and Zara, who usually brushed things off with humor, told a friend once over lunch, "I don't know. Sometimes I feel like he watches me sleep." The friend laughed it off. So did Zara. But sometimes people laugh when they're afraid. And in the weeks before the wedding, there were other things. Zara canceled a bachelorette trip last minute. She seemed nervous during her dress fitting. She even asked her sister Julia if it was normal to feel scared before walking down the aisle. Because even though everything looked right, something didn't feel right. But it was too late. The date was set. The guests had RSVP'd. And Zara? She always put other people's comfort before her own. So she said yes. And just hours after she walked down that aisle, a bullet shattered everything. It was a perfect day. A Saturday in early spring, sun warming the edges of the small white chapel just outside town. 80 guests gathered beneath soft-hung lights and hand-picked flowers. Zara wore lace, vintage style. Her veil flowed gently as she walked down the aisle, tears in her eyes. Michael stood tall, smiling, hands clasped, eyes fixed on her. Their vows were handwritten, emotional, honest. Zara promised to love him through silence. Michael promised to protect her, always. At the reception, guests remember laughter, a first dance to an old country song, toasts full of hope. They fed each other cake, shared a kiss under twinkle lights. Everyone said they looked so in love. That night they checked into the Honeysuckle Cottage, a private honeymoon suite 10 minutes from the venue. No staff, just a keypad entry, a small fireplace, a bottle of wine left on the table, rose petals on the bed. No one heard from them again until 2:04 a.m. That's when a nearby neighbor, up nursing her infant, reported hearing something strange, a muffled scream, like someone trying to yell through cloth. She told herself maybe it was a raccoon or the wind. She didn't call the police. At 5:13 a.m., a jogger spotted something in the ditch by the side of the main road. A woman, barefoot, pale, covered in blood. Her wedding dress was torn at the shoulder, her bouquet still clutched in one hand. There was a single gunshot wound just below her collarbone, blood soaked through the satin. She was barely conscious. When paramedics arrived, they scanned the area. There was no sign of Michael, no wallet, no phone. His car was gone. And the door to the honeymoon cottage? Locked from the inside, no sign of forced entry, no note. She was taken to County General. Doctors said her heart was slowing, one lung had collapsed. They didn't expect her to survive the night. But at 6:49 a.m., in the middle of a crowded trauma room, a nurse yelled out, "She's still breathing." It took 21 hours of surgery. She drifted in and out of consciousness, and for 2 days the entire town waited, praying, speculating, wondering what could have possibly gone wrong. On the morning of the third day, her sister Julia sat at her bedside, holding her hand. Zara's eyes fluttered open. She blinked slowly, lips chapped, barely moving. A nurse leaned in, and then, in a soft, broken whisper, Zara spoke. "Michael," she said, "my husband shot me." The moment Zara whispered Michael's name, everything changed. The hospital notified police. A detective was dispatched to the ICU. Within hours, a full manhunt had begun. Detectives combed through the wedding guest list. Family members were questioned. Friends were pulled in. The honeymoon cottage was sealed off with yellow tape. Michael's phone had been powered off shortly after midnight. His credit cards, untouched. His bank account, no activity. But then footage surfaced. A traffic camera, roughly 8 miles from the honeymoon cottage, showed Michael's car heading east, toward the state line. He didn't appear frantic or disoriented. In fact, he looked calm. One hand on the wheel, the other resting near his chin. He was driving away from his new bride, who was bleeding out in a ditch. As word of the shooting spread, the town was split. Some believed it was a tragic case of emotional violence, an argument that went too far. Others weren't so sure. At first, there was no obvious motive. There were no public fights, no prior abuse reports. Zara had never spoken of fear. But when investigators began searching Zara's personal effects, what they found unraveled everything. In the bottom of her purse, tucked inside a travel makeup pouch, were two forms of identification, one current, one outdated. Her driver's license had been legally updated 6 years earlier. Name, gender marker, everything. But the old ID, the one accidentally left behind, told a different story. It listed a male name, male gender. It had been expired for years, but still, it was there. Detectives traced Zara's background and confirmed she had transitioned in her late 20s after relocating to another state. She had quietly started over. Only her sister Julia knew. It hadn't come up in wedding planning, not in premarital counseling, not even with her closest friends in town. Because to Zara, this was her past. Something she had survived, not something she needed to explain. But now, police had to ask, did Michael know before the wedding? And if not, was this a crime of passion, born out of anger, betrayal, confusion? Or had he always known? And was this part of something far more calculated? Then came another discovery. The marriage license, still sitting at the county clerk's office, unsigned. They had never officially submitted it. When detectives opened Zara's wedding night overnight bag, they found the license, folded, untouched. Beside it was the pouch containing her documents, legal and expired. Had Michael found it that night? Had he opened her bag looking for something simple, lip balm, aspirin, anything, and seen the name, the gender marker, the piece of her past she hadn't shared? Or had he always known and waited for this exact moment to act? The question now wasn't just who did it, but why he snapped so violently. Was it heartbreak, rage, shame? Or had the mask he wore all along finally slipped? What came next turned the case upside down. While the public still debated whether Michael acted out of sudden rage or emotional shock, investigators uncovered something far more disturbing. They got a warrant for his laptop. Buried in hidden folders and encrypted emails was a trail that pointed to a secret life Michael had kept completely hidden. For the last year, Michael had been corresponding with an online community tied to a fringe group promoting so-called moral cleansing. Their forums were littered with extremist ideologies, radical views about gender, purity, and control. Michael hadn't just read the posts, he participated, he shared opinions, he asked questions, and among the recovered emails, one stood out. "She'll never tell me," he wrote, "but I already know, and I won't be made a fool." Investigators also uncovered a sealed court record from 5 years earlier. A woman in another state had filed a restraining order against Michael. She claimed he became obsessive, that he followed her, that when she ended the relationship, he whispered to her, "You'll regret lying to me." That case was dismissed. The documents had remained sealed until now. 2 weeks after the wedding night, Michael was caught 300 miles away in a rented cabin near the Appalachian Trail. He surrendered without resistance, told officers, "I don't want to talk, I just want to go home." In court, he tried to plead insanity. His defense team painted a picture of emotional collapse, of trauma, of betrayal. But prosecutors came prepared. They introduced evidence that stunned even the judge. Michael had been researching for weeks. Google searches that read, "Can you annul a marriage if your spouse lied?" "Signs your partner is hiding something." "How to shoot without noise." "What happens if you shoot someone in the chest?" The jury sat silent. Zara sat in the front row, her chest still healing, the scar hidden beneath her blouse. But then came the moment no one expected. She took the stand. Her voice was steady. Her hands didn't shake. And when asked what she would say to the man who nearly ended her life, Zara looked straight at him and said, "I didn't lie to you, Michael. I trusted you with the most sacred part of me, my truth, and you chose violence over love." The entire courtroom fell still, because in that moment, the story wasn't just about what had been done to her. It was about what she survived. Zara's testimony became the turning point of the entire trial. She walked into the courtroom slowly, the faint outline of her surgical scar hidden under a pale blue blouse. But her voice, it didn't tremble. She was calm, measured, certain. She told the jury everything. How in the early days of the relationship Michael made her feel safe. How he'd say things like, "You're the first person I can be myself with." But as the months passed, he became more possessive. He wanted to know where she was at all times. He didn't like her wearing makeup to work. He insisted on handling the wedding guest list himself. Zara said she had planned to tell him, not out of fear, but out of love, because she believed in the man she thought he was. But something changed. He started controlling what I wore, what I said, who I talked to, she told the courtroom. And that's when I knew, if I told him, it wouldn't be safe. The prosecutor asked one final question. Why do you think he did it? Zara looked straight ahead, her eyes firm. He didn't kill me because I lied, she said. He tried to kill me because I wouldn't be controlled. The courtroom was silent. A week later, the jury returned its verdict. Michael Carson, guilty on all counts. Attempted murder, assault with a deadly weapon, premeditation. The judge sentenced him to 27 years in prison without the possibility of parole. No outbursts, no apologies, just a man in handcuffs, being led away from the life he chose to destroy. But the story didn't end there. In the months after the trial, Zara made a decision. She didn't move away. She didn't hide. Instead, she began speaking, at schools, shelters, online forums. She shared her story with other trans women, especially those in relationships where love was twisted into control. She said, "I lived through this, not because I'm strong, but because I refused to let fear write the end of my story." This wasn't just a crime of betrayal. It was a war between truth and control, love and hate. And in the end, Zara chose love. For herself, for the life she almost lost, and for every woman still waiting to be seen. Would you have seen the signs? Could this have been prevented? Or was it always destined to fall apart the moment trust gave way to control? What does love really mean? When it's built on fear, silence, or the constant pressure to hide who you truly are? Zara survived something most people couldn't even imagine, but the question remains, was justice served in this case? Should partners be obligated to share everything about their past, no matter how personal or painful? And if you were Zara, what would you have done? Would you have told him sooner? Would you have walked away before the vows? Would you have seen the danger beneath his smile? Let us know in the comments. We read every single one. And if you thought this story was disturbing, wait until you hear what happened when a bride disappeared at her own rehearsal dinner, and the groom was found just hours later, with her wedding dress stuffed in his trunk. Subscribe for more real-life crime stories that reveal the darkest sides of love and trust, because sometimes the person you love most is the one you should fear the most.